we wait to see if Yevgeny Prigozhin accidentally falls out Vladimir Putin's window in a month, or if Vladimir Putin accidentally falls out Yevgeny Prigozhin's window in a month, it is clear that Jack Smith is again in the end game for more Trump indictments, this time about the fake electors, and that he and his team are also really, shockingly confident that they will get a quick conviction of Trump in the documents case. First, the fake electors. It was obscured because TV news and even most big-time newspapers exceeded the number of big stories they can effectively cover simultaneously, one, and we had Russia and the Titanic Sub. But Jack Smith has bought the testimony of two Nevada fakes and may have already bought the testimony of the guy who was the Trump campaign's director of, in essence, fake electors. Smith is also locking in testimony, and he's clearly coming down the stretch towards indictments. Almost certainly that will include the deplorable Justice Department hatchet-man Jeff, can I put my pants on, Clark, and Rudy Giuliani, and Sidney Powell, and with any luck, Jenna, Ellis, and Boris Epshteyn too, and probably Trump as well. It seems evident they will not be indicting Michael Roman, or at least not seriously indicting him. The New York Times quotes an unnamed familiar who says Roman was in discussions with Smith last week for some kind of immunity. Roman's official title with the defendant's 2020 campaign was Director of Election Day Operations, but he was clearly the in-house assignment desk for the plan to send alternate Electoral College slates in from swing states and to artificially manufacture the kind of chaos that happened organically after the 1876 presidential election and to a lesser degree after Bush v. Gore in 2000. As the Times phrases it, quote, Mr. Roman did much of the legwork in putting together the fake elector plan and in finding ways to challenge Trump's losses in several key battleground states, according to emails reviewed by the Times. Roman was in constant contact with Jenna Ellis and Boris Epshteyn, and he had his fingers in the effort to put together fake slates from, among others, Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, and Nevada. The lid on the Nevada scheme has clearly already blown off. While the Times was talking about Michael Roman potentially flipping, it was CNN reporting that the special counsel had forced the testimony of the Nevada GOP chairman Michael McDonald and Nevada GOP National Committee member Jim DeGraffenreid. They were both actual fake electors. They were both forced to testify in exchange for limited immunity. They were both seen at the D.C. grand jury the very day Trump was being indicted in Miami. The CNN reporting offered a procedural detail that's just as interesting as the flipping of two principals in the Nevada scam, a, quote, parade of related witnesses being told to appear before the grand jury with no chance for delay. Prosecutors have played hardball with some of the witnesses in recent weeks, demanding they testify before the end of this month, unquote. CNN says at least 6 witnesses testified last week and the week before, and 2 others previously. CNN and the Times agree that one of those 8 witnesses is Michael Roman's deputy in the Trump campaign election day office, quoting again Gary Michael Brown, who had told campaign staff he delivered fake elector votes for Trump to Congress from battleground states. The Times says this Brown testified last Thursday. Brown could be pivotal because when the House January 6th committee reached out to him, he vanished. He ain't vanished no more. He's done testified. And again, where this is leading, CNN sources duplicate those of the Times. It's leading to Rudy Giuliani and Sidney Powell and Jeff, can I put my pants on, Clark, and they are in a world of hurt. As we know from the sexual abuse lawsuit against him, Giuliani is alleged to be too strung out on booze and Viagra to understand the danger approaching him full on. Clark has that wonderful combination of arrogance and stupidity that will keep him convinced he's not going to jail until the moment the cell door locks behind him. And Sidney Powell is not of this earth. This could lead to a scenario in which the fake elector lawyer most likely to flip on Trump is Jenna Ellis. This past March, Jenna Ellis was disciplined by the Colorado bar, and in a deal that saved her from losing her license, she admitted she had knowingly misrepresented facts about the 2020 election, mostly on Fox, and claimed the Trump gang had evidence of voter fraud that never happened in at least 10 different public statements. Ellis then tried to lie her way out of her own admission by saying her admission did not mean she had admitted to lying, and that her admission was to, quote, dishonesty, fraud, deceit, or misrepresentation. As snotty as that was, it made it very clear and very evident that they can break Jenna Ellis pretty easily whenever they need to. Back to the Michael Roman part of this story, and one vignette from the Times that underscores how helpfully stupid these people really were. Michael Roman emailed Giuliani endless details of the fake electors schemes in various states. In December 2020, one of the Trump lawyers in Arizona, a man named Jack Walenchik, was good enough to write to Boris Epshteyn, according to the Times, quote, "We would just be sending in, quote, fake, unquote, electoral votes to Pence so that, quote, someone, unquote, in Congress can make an objection when they start counting votes and start arguing that the, quote, fake, unquote, votes should be counted, unquote." That's how the Times quotes Walenchik's email to Boris Epshteyn. As if that did not hang a big enough indict me sign around everybody's neck, the Times says Walenchik wrote a follow-up email clarifying that they should probably refer to them as, quote, alternate electors rather than, quote, fake electors. And he added a smiley face emoji. And if you do a Google image search for him, you will see he not only looks like he's 12 years old, but he looks like he's 12 years old and has just been smacked in the face with a shovel. Walenchik, that's Wilenchik, Walenchik, is an employment and business lawyer, which will presumably help him in whatever employment he finds in his next business. The sum total of the fake electors thing is, who besides Michael Roman and the two Nevada electors are now likely to get out of it with their liberties intact, and who is going to get indicted? That's unclear. But Jack Smith picked up the pace here since early June with almost exactly the same speed as he picked up the pace in the 2 weeks before the documents indictments. On that prong of the Trump prosecution, and the Trump prosecution is vast, and I think you and I and Trump and his supporters, all of us, forget just how vast this really is and how many prongs, 3, 4, 5, there could be. On the documents prong, National Security lawyer Brandon Van Grack wrote after the special counsel's motions last Friday that it is clear to him that the, quote, DOJ doesn't believe this case is that complex and thus thinks the trial should happen this year, unquote, which will still be quite a trick since Justice moved to postpone the start of the trial until December 11th. The delay is to allow Trump's lawyers to get clearance to see the documents in question, and Van Grack says it'll only take a couple of days for them to be cleared to see nearly all of the documents, but again, quoting him, a small number of docs are so sensitive and restricted that it will take 45 to 60 days for counsel to receive the appropriate clearance. That is highly unusual, he writes. DOJ also notes some of these restricted docs are not even the ones charged in the indictment. That lengthy delay, he writes, for a clearance confirms the sensitivity of these docs, the potential harm to national security, and how much the intelligence community supports the prosecution that it is even willing to consider providing them to defense counsel, unquote. To translate, Jack Smith's team thinks it has such a damning case against the defendant that showing Trump's lawyers some of the documents he stole and he revealed will make them gasp. Meanwhile, the defendant continues to confess in public at every opportunity. The only way he could do it more frequently or more damningly would be if he were to go door to door or to stop passersby in the street. Trump gave a speech to a bunch of religious nutbags Saturday night. They cheered wildly when he said, quote, "I was indicted for you," because there's nothing they like better than a good fake martyrdom story. That quote obviously grabbed the headlines. So did that bizarre noise Trump made during the speech, which I will not play here. But it's this quote that shows the hold that the feedback loop has on Dementia J. Trump's tiny little mind. Trump has been told 3 different stories here, presumably by this idiot Tom Fitton, who is not a lawyer but plays one on Trump's TV, the one that only Trump can see. But all Trump has heard in these 3 different stories are the magic words, "Of course you're not guilty," and one image that he can grab hold of and sell to those who are even more gullible than himself. And that image, that word is socks.
It has something to do with socks and taking things out in your socks. After leaving the White House, Bill Clinton kept 79 audio tapes in his socks and his sock drawer. So he put them in his sock. I didn't. I put mine in boxes outside of the White House, and the GSA picked them up and delivered them where they were supposed to be delivered.
Socks. By the way, there is photographic evidence that as Trump gave that speech, Mike Huckabee up on the dais dozed off, which means Mike Huckabee ain't woke. Anyway, Trump's illness makes it impossible for him to actually hear all of anything that anybody else has ever said to him, unless it relates to words that are about how wonderful he is or when he is getting more money. Trump's attention span is literally half a sentence. 1. Trump recognizes the name Socks as the name of Bill Clinton's late cat. 2. Trump has been told the actual story of Bill Clinton's national security advisor, Sandy Berger, going into the archives 2 years after the Clinton presidency had ended and stealing all the copies of one document and stuffing them into his socks and then leaving the archives. 3. Trump has been told the story of Clinton's sock drawer. There were tapes recorded for a biographer of Clinton's memories of his presidency. They were kept in a drawer. 11 years later, this maroon Fitton sued to have the tapes declared presidential records, which would then have allowed him to claim that Clinton had committed a crime by keeping them. The judge threw the case out, saying there was no legal process so many years after the fact to declare them presidential records, even if they were presidential records, and she didn't think they were presidential records. 4. Fitton explained to Trump not that the judge's verdict meant that he, Fitton, had screwed up and it had nothing to do with presidential records. Fitton instead told Trump that because he, Fitton, had failed to get the tapes declared presidential records, that meant that nothing of any kind could ever be declared presidential records, that everything was a president's personal property. Of course he lost, Fitton in essence explained. No one could win this, ever, which means you're not guilty. So they said all that to Trump, and he heard, Clinton, socks, you're not guilty. The rest of it was the voice of Charlie Brown's teacher. I'm now beginning to believe Tom Fitton is a Democratic plant. Occasionally, I think Kevin McCarthy is one, too. Marjorie Taylor Greene, now so toxic that the ironically named House Freedom Caucus is working on expelling her. Marjorie Taylor, Barney Rubble, white supremacist Karen Greene, and Elise Stefanik, who sold her soul to the devil, they are proposing a non-binding resolution to expunge Trump's impeachments, quote, as if such articles of impeachment had never passed the full House of Representatives. McCarthy says he supports the measure. Whether it gets buried in committee or not, let's see how far this two-bit tiny town politician from Bakersfield with the dead look in his eyes wants to follow Trump down this drain, because if the House can pass a non-binding resolution that expunges Trump's impeachments, then the next Democratic House can pass a non-binding resolution that expunges any record of Kevin McCarthy ever being Speaker. And for that matter, a Democratic House and Senate could certainly combine to vote to expunge any record of Trump ever being president. Also of interest here, this expunging thing seems to be a theme throughout society. They are trying to pretend none of that whole mutiny and treason speech thingy happened in Russia over the weekend, but I'm not convinced that we've seen the last shoe drop. Nor, for that matter, the last Russian drop. And stop, he's already dead. First, CNN fired pasteboy Chris Licht, but now they are erasing all trace of his signature there. I mean that literally. No more signature. No longer will it say... That's next. This is Countdown.
This is Countdown with Keith Olbermann.
Postscripts to the news, some headlines, some updates, some snarks, some predictions. Dateline Moscow. The BBC's impeccable correspondent there, Steve Rosenberg, summed it up with a photo of the car driving ahead of him on a Moscow street yesterday. On the back windshield, big white letters in English, quote, WTF is going on? I claim no particular Russian insight other than what my Ukrainian great-grandmother supposedly said all the time. You can't fix Russian. But I think I know what happened there. The Wagner Group faced a deadline of July 1st to sign up as Russian army regulars. Prigozhin was fed up with the deal in Ukraine as it was. He convoyed towards Moscow. He hoped for units of the Russian army to peel off and join him. None did. Back at the ranch, Putin remembered nearly all of his army is in Ukraine, and while he could probably hold off a military coup, maybe he couldn't. They had each left themselves a back door, and they each took it, and I don't know what's next, but if you think Prigozhin has happily retired to beautiful downtown Belarus, that anybody happily retires to Belarus, or that Putin will be happy to have him nearby after having his invulnerability erased over the span of just 48 hours, you're crazy. This isn't over. It has barely begun. Nancy Faust. Dateline Georgia. Rolling Stone reporting that the creators of the Heal the Divide super PAC, backing that Trojan horse candidacy of Robert F. Kennedy Jr., quote, have a deeply pro-Trump bent, including ties to arch-MAGA officials such as Marjorie Taylor Greene, George Santos, and Herschel Walker. Rolling Stone notes several overlaps between the Kennedy super PAC and MAGA PAC. Quote, a mistake on the group's website gives away its origins. The site's terms of service appear to have been copied and pasted from MAGA PAC, a Trump super PAC, and incorrectly refers to the Heal the Divide site as MAGAPAC.com. Plus, Kennedy is to speak at the annual summit of Moms for Liberty this week. Moms for Liberty are the ones who favorably quoted Hitler about owning kids in the first issue of one of their newsletters. Now it turns out they had used the exact same Hitler quote at a presentation in Florida 2 years ago. So just remember, it's easy to do it using our friend, the acronym. That's Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Traitor. Just remember, RFK Jr. MAGA. RFK JR MAGA. Sometimes I like to feel goofy. Thank you again, Nancy Faust. And Dateline CNN headquarters, Hudson Yards, New York. By the way, did I ever mention that my studios for Countdown on Current TV in 2011 and 2012 were at Hudson Yards in New York, only before it was built up nice and it was just, yards with trains in them? When I say studio, it wasn't really a studio. It was more a portal to hell with studio lights, occasionally with studio lights. Anywho, CNN has really come around to the point I made here for nearly a year about Chris Licht. Not only did they fire him, but Puck News is reporting that the big change he promised that would redefine news, a different set of on-air graphics, will be eliminated starting today. You know, the ones that look like they were not exactly Photoshopped, they weren't quite that good, but that they were done by you or me using our iPhone photo editing text box. And they'll go back to the ones Chris Licht got rid of. Now all they have to do is unfire Don Lemon and put him back on in the evenings and erase all copies of the Trump town hall, put the word silo back in Anderson Cooper's mouth, and of course not roll out that Caitlin Collins primetime show at 9 p.m. this June as Licht and... Hey, wait a minute. This June? This is this June? What? You guys thought we wouldn't notice that you stopped talking about the new Caitlin Collins primetime show and it's postponed or canceled or something? Huh? Well, to be honest, I didn't notice till just now.
This is Sports Center. Wait, check that. Not anymore. This is Countdown with Keith Olbermann.
In sports, baseball, Cardinals beat the Cubs 7-5 yesterday after the Cubs beat the Cardinals 9-1 Saturday, thus splitting their two-game series in London. No, not London, Ontario. London in England. Once again, baseball is congratulating itself on playing games on another continent because... I'll wait. All I see is fans who already can't watch their team on TV on the baseball app because the rules about blackouts and coverage areas were written in the year 379 BC. Fans who can't watch their team on TV because that game, I'm sorry, it's been shifted to streaming service A or over to streaming service B 237 on Sunday mornings. They now can't go to two of their team's home games because they were moved from St. Louis, Missouri to freaking London, where baseball is just as popular now as it was the first time Major League executives thought a British tour would be a gold mine. That was in 1874. No, seriously. The Boston Red Stockings and the Philadelphia Athletics missed nearly 2 months of the 1874 National Association season so they could get on a boat for 2 weeks to go to England, play some games that nobody went to, and then come back on a boat for another 2 weeks. It didn't work then, and it's not working now. Baseball took the occasion of this latest successful failure to announce next year's London series, which will wipe off 2 Mets home games from the schedule. Back here, the New York Yankees tried to walk back home run record setter Aaron Judge's revelation about his injured big right toe. Of course, they can't walk it back because it's an injured big right toe. Saturday, Judge said suddenly he had torn a ligament in it. The Yankees yesterday insisted they were not lying when they called it a sprain, since all sprains are just incomplete tears after all. It's the same thing. Nobody knows if Aaron Judge will play again this season. And one more baseball note, lots of baseball people, even the really statistically with it modern metrics types, rely on one particular stat, run differential. A team that has scored 100 runs more than its opponent is dominant and likely for postseason success, except if that stat gets warped by blowout wins, because you can win 100 games by 1 run each, and that would be a run differential of 100. I'm oversimplifying, obviously. Or you could win 33 games and lose all the others by like 3 runs each, and that would be a run differential of 297. You get my point. Or you could do what the Colorado Rockies did over the weekend. Get yourselves outscored by the Los Angeles Angels 32-12. I'll repeat that, 32-12 over 3 games, which gives you, Colorado, a run differential of minus 20, and you still wind up winning 2 of the 3 games? That's because the one Colorado lost, they lost 25-1. Run differential is as useless as pitchers' victories. Remember pitchers' victories? Still ahead, there are all kinds of surprises in life, but none quite has the staying power of looking out your apartment window and noticing that 10 floors below you, your building is on fire. Surprise! It's nearly 43 years now, and I still remember every moment. I will recite them all to you next. First, the daily roundup of the miscreants, morons, and Dunning-Kruger effect specimens who constitute today's worst persons in the world, and I am declaring Nikki Haley ineligible after her tweet about how everything was perfect when you were a kid, so please remember to be a kid again, and she'll be everybody's fascist mommy, because everybody already ended her career for her because of that tweet. And I'm declaring Meghan McCain ineligible for calling Hunter Biden a Nepo baby, and Lance Armstrong ineligible for questioning whether trans athletes are cheating because clearly neither of them owns a mirror. So here are our winners. The bronze, Chuck Todd. Chuck, how can we miss you if you won't go away? He's a lame duck on Meet the Press, but they're still sending him out there to do a show called Meet the Press Now on a streaming service I just found out NBC has called NBC News Now. NBC News Now. News Now. Now News. Friday, Chuck, still as gullible as ever, signed on to the Hunter Biden conspiracy, noting 2 credible IRS whistleblowers claiming misconduct by the Department of Justice, according to transcripts released by the Republican-led House and Ways and Means Committee. House and Ways and Means, Chuck. House and Ways and Means. House and Ways and Means, chicks and ducks and geese better scurry when I take you out in the Surrey, when I take you out. That's the chuckles I know. The runner-up, Texas Governor Greg Abbott, just not bright. You'd think that when Antonio Sabato Jr. got caught retweeting a tweet bashing Garth Brooks, which cited an article in the, quote, Dunning-Kruger Times, other people would be on the lookout for other Dunning-Kruger Times stories? No, not so much. Abbott linked to this one. Garth Brooks booed off stage at 123rd Annual Texas County Jamboree. Go woke, go broke. Good job, Texas. There is no Texas County Country Jamboree. There is no Dunning-Kruger Times. Sadly, though, there is a Governor Greg Abbott. But the winner, the really out-there fascist streamer Stu Peters. The whole Titanic Sub story, I mean, did you see this? See anything about this in the news? I didn't see a lot of coverage of it in the news. Did they cover it at all? Did they do anything on it? At all? Any of the networks? Any of the newspapers? Well, this guy Peters has an explanation as to what happened. It's the Jews. Because the Jews did the Titanic, too, you understand. The graphic on his little streaming show read, Titanic disaster enabled creation of corrupt Federal Reserve, missing submarine Rothschild funded. And you know what Rothschild means. It means Soros. Here we go. Here's what Stu Peters said. What if all this is actually a ploy to keep people from visiting the Titanic wreckage? But if that's the goal, why? Maybe because if people explore the Titanic too much, they would discover that it wasn't an iceberg that sank the Titanic. There's a lot of alternative theories about how that sinking occurred, that it was intentionally sunk as part of an elaborate insurance scam, and even that it was sunk by a newly created Federal Reserve. Unquote. What if your life was like this? Around every corner there's another plot against you by omnipotent crews who can sink passenger liners and cause stories like the Titanic submersible to happen just to eclipse your bullcrap Hunter Biden smear that only fooled Chuck Todd. How do these people even get out of bed in the morning? I'd be afraid to put on my shoes before they blew up. Stu Peters. If you want a real conspiracy, please remember, the first 2 syllables of the name Stu Peters form the sound Stu Pete. Today's worst person in the world. Ducks and geese and buttons scurry. To the number 1 story on the countdown and my favorite topic, me and things I promised not to tell. And circumstances the other day took me past my first New York City apartment. I stopped and stood and stared, and I shook my head, and again I saw in my mind the flames and the glow and the blackened lobby. Because one night somebody threw a Molotov cocktail into the building in which I had my first New York City apartment while I was in my first New York City apartment. The address was, and is, 240 East 55th Street, apartment 10F. It was 2 doors west of 2nd Avenue, south side of the street. It was the center apartment on the street side of the building, and I was directly above the front entrance and above the only thing of note in the whole place, a full-fledged, old-fashioned New York City apartment building canopy. You could get out of a cab in a rainstorm and under that canopy in like a second and a half, and pretty much not get wet. No doorman, no amenities, a rather dubious live-in super, but it had that canopy. I moved in on June 17, 1980. It was a big studio apartment. The view was of a big video warehouse across the street, though if you leaned out the westernmost window, you could see the Citicorp Center, which was always an impressive sight on a foggy night. The neighborhood and the building were safe and quiet. At least I thought they were safe. It was a 15-minute walk from my first job and then a 25-minute walk from my second job. And when I first rented there, it was, are you ready, $483 a month, which sounds unbelievable, except that was about a third of my salary. And I think when I moved out in 1984, the rent had gone up to $510 a month, and that low price might have had something to do with the fact that one night somebody threw a Molotov cocktail into the building. You know how once you've been in any place for any length of time, you get used to the physics of it, the feel of it? Not just some place you live, any place you spend a lot of time in, an office, a classroom, a theater, or an apartment. You know what it sounds like. You know what it feels like in the summer, or how it feels differently in the winter. You know what it looks like, the building noise, the smells, if it's too hot, if it's too cold, and especially, and think about this for a second, especially what the light looks like at every hour of the day. I don't know if there was a day when I could have said, this is what the light looks like in apartment 10F, 240 East 55th Street during a snowstorm, or what the light looks like coming in through the shades at 8 in the morning or 8 at night. But it probably didn't take long. June 1980 was when I moved in. I bet I knew the various lights of the place by September. So by New Year's of 1983, I knew it all instinctively, exactly, reflexively, boringly. I would go to my bed in the southeast corner of my studio apartment. I'd get in, sleeping north-south, but with my head at the south end. And as I lay on my back, I could look out the windows and see the faint orangey glow from a couple of street lights that shone through the 4 windows that opened, 2 on either side of a kind of small picture window in the middle. The light would be brightest from the window on the farthest right, which was the one closest to 2nd Avenue and the closest to one of those street lights. So on Sunday, January 9th, 1983, as that night turned into Monday, January 10th, 1983, I hit the sack around midnight because I actually had one of those rare 9-to-5 jobs in television as a field reporter for CNN. I shut off the light on my nightstand, I laid down on my back, I stared out my right-hand window, and immediately I thought, boy, the light is slightly more orange than it should be. What the hell's wrong? I'm guessing it was no more than 5 or 10% different from usual, but as I've gone to such lengths to point out, if you see the same light through the same window in all conceivable conditions almost every night for more than 2 years, 5 or 10% difference is a lot. I think I lay there trying to figure it out for a minute or so when I realized it was now 10 or 15% different. Cleverly, I got up and went to the window and rolled up the shade and looked down to that canopy 10 floors below, and I must say, to my credit, I quickly discerned that the canopy was on fire. I reacted as almost everybody does, matter-of-factly thinking, maybe even saying out loud, "Hey, the canopy is on fire," and then registering the fact that the fire had already burned through the building end of that canopy, and it was moving quickly outwards towards the street. suggesting, again, I must say, I figured this out for myself, suggesting that there was probably a fire in the lobby. I put a robe on over my pajamas, I put on some shoes, I grabbed my wallet and my keys, and I ventured into the hallway. No smell of smoke, which I took, again, intelligently as a good sign. 2 elevators were staring me in the face, but I knew better than to try them. I was, after all, the grandson of a firefighter. So I opened the stairwell, and then I smelled the smoke. Faint, but it was there. I went down 2 floors, and every step I took, the smell got a little stronger. I went back up. I went back into my apartment. I did not really know what I was going to do. Needless to say, 10 floors is not jumpable. Also, there was no outdoor fire escape like in many of the New York City older apartment buildings, and even if I went down the elevator or the stairs or the side of the damned building, I would wind up right in the middle of the fire. For a few seconds, I really didn't know what to do next. Me, the grandson of the man who was not only a firefighter, but who drove the hook and ladder. Irony. Also, fire! That's when the sound of the fire engines broke me out of self-absorption and cheered me, I must say, considerably. They parked right near where that convenient canopy used to be, but was now pretty much a charred hunk of the metal framing and a little burned fabric. I'm sure you've seen a fire. Maybe you've seen firefighters arrive at one and get going with their amazing speed, but there is something different in seeing it from the vantage point of being above the fire. First, there is an extraordinary amount of water, then a lot of smoke, then an almost unstoppable instinct to say, cool. And then you go and check the stairwell again and joyfully inhale the smell of stuff that had been on fire, but was now no longer on fire and just inundated with water. Hallelujah. I waited until after they left before I decided to go back to my bed. I did not feel the need to add to whatever loud chaos was going on in the lobby, or what had been the lobby, nor to get any details about the fire other than the key one, which was, it's out! But in the morning, since I had to go to work anyway, I saw the elevator door open onto the little linoleum-covered landing in the lobby and saw that everything else but it in the lobby was jet black. They were still hosing some of it down. They were already pulling up burned carpet, installing new windows and doors, and carting away what was left of the canopy, and it was evident that as thorough a job as had been done there, nothing else in the building had burned. Nothing. In the days and weeks to come, the other residents, knowing I worked in news, clued me in on the rumors and asked me to check them out. There was a dispute, somebody said, involving the owner. There was something about a woman. No, there was nothing about a woman. But all of them, every story, every rumor included the obvious. That was no boating accident. Somebody had thrown a Molotov cocktail into or against our front door. And then there was the best of the stories, borne out, or at least lent plausibility by the rapidity with which the firefighters arrived, which, thinking back on it, was no more than 3 or 4 minutes after I first saw the extra orangey glow. The best rumor was that the fire department had been called by somebody before anybody in the building had called. The implication was somebody called in a fire and then started the fire. For 40 years plus, I have been unable to find the truth. The fire, doing superficial but ultimately not serious damage, did not make the New York newspapers. Hell, that year I took a subway to work in the morning and there was a guy sprawled over 3 seats. And when I went home that night, I happened to get on the exact same train car and there was the exact same guy sprawled over the exact same 3 seats because he was dead. And that didn't make the New York newspapers of 1983 either. We old-timey New Yorkers, we lived on the edge, baby. All I know is that within weeks, a doorman was hired. His name was Gene, and he had a strong Irish accent, and he was still there as of 2002. And then the building suddenly went co-op. All of us renters were suddenly offered the chance to buy our apartments. But I didn't want to take out a loan, and I expected to be moving to Boston in the near future, and I kept thinking about that Molotov cocktail, so I turned down that apartment at the price of Are you lying down? $36,500. Turned it down. Because, yeah, there was the fire and the loan and Boston. But ultimately, I turned it down even just to keep as a storage unit. I turned that apartment down because when it comes to investments, I'm a moron. You know, and it still shows up in my dreams sometimes, too. Not often, though. I'm sure I'll be over it any time now. It's only been 42 and a half years. I've done all the damage I can do here. Thank you for listening. Here are the credits. Most of the music was arranged, produced, and performed by Brian Ray and John Philip Chanel. They are the Countdown musical directors. Guitars, bass, and drums by Brian Ray. All orchestration and keyboards by John Philip Chanel. The producers, TKO Brothers. Other Beethoven selections arranged and performed by the group No Horns Allowed. The sports music is the Olbermann theme from ESPN2. It was written by Mitch Warren Davis, courtesy of ESPN Inc. Musical comments by Nancy Faust, the best baseball stadium organist ever. Our announcer today was my friend Kenny Mayne, and everything else is pretty much my fault. So that's Countdown for this, the 902nd day since Donald Trump's first attempted coup against the democratically elected government of the United States. Arrest him again while we still can. You think Jack Smith listens to this podcast? Because he sure has been busy arresting him while he still can. Thank you, Jack. The next Political Countdown is tomorrow. Till then, I'm Keith Olbermann. Good morning, good afternoon, good night, and good luck.